Today we have Meagan Winn with us. She is the Eviction Diversion Coordinator of the Milwaukee County Eviction Diversion Initiative. And her background is that she has a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Fordham, a Master's in Public Service in Criminal Justice Administration from Marquette. And her prior work, I know, is from the Benedict Center. She spent several years working at the Benedict Center. And her LinkedIn profile also says she's a policy specialist, or was, at the Crime and Justice Institute, and worked for a while with the Adult Treatment Court as a coordinator in Milwaukee County. I love her LinkedIn profile where she describes herself as a legal system reform advocate, problem solver, and project manager. I'm going to hand it over to Meagan now to talk about the Eviction Diversion Initiative.
Thanks, Margot. So Milwaukee County was a recipient of a grant from the National Center for State Courts. The grant started last summer. It's a 2-year grant, and it's called the Eviction Diversion Initiative. So we are part of the first cohort of jurisdictions around the country that are piloting eviction diversion strategies. Some jurisdictions are working on pre-filing interventions, some are working on post-filing interventions, but this first cohort includes Alaska, which is actually doing a statewide program, Nevada, Kansas, Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee, New York, Washington, D.C., and us. And so the main goals of the Eviction Diversion Initiative are to give landlords and tenants the time, information, and resources to resolve housing issues inside and outside of court. So really looking at alternatives when those are appropriate, and trying to make sure that people who are involved in eviction court know what resources are available. And if they didn't find out about those resources before court, sort of using the courts as a vehicle to connect people to resources. So the project is funding coordinators across the country to connect people to legal and non-legal services, including legal aid, mediation, rental assistance, and financial and housing counseling, tailored referrals to additional stabilizing services. So if people need help that is helping sort of the underlying reasons that they might be facing an eviction, looking a little bit more broadly at those resources, and providing referrals to social supports as well. Providing assistance with navigating the court process, making sure people understand how eviction court works and how they can prepare to be involved in eviction court. Creating more user-friendly court rules and procedures that are designed to increase access to legal and non-legal resources. Providing self-help resources for landlords and tenants, particularly those who are representing themselves in courts, and providing updated outreach and communication strategies to really raise awareness of resources that are available and to encourage participation into the court process. So this grant is providing technical assistance. There's a data collection element where jurisdictions are providing data about eviction cases in their jurisdictions. And so the grant is really going to be able to look across different jurisdictions, look at what places are doing, and sort of come up with strategies and develop best practices in real time. So eviction diversion as an idea is relatively new. There are places like Kalamazoo, Michigan has been doing eviction diversion since 2010, but most of the eviction diversion programs have really sprung up in the course of the pandemic and in response to the eviction moratorium ending. And so a lot of this work is relatively new, and trying to figure out what works and what's effective, and what of those pandemic era practices that courts adapted to should be continued into the future. So in terms of Milwaukee County and what we're doing here, the courts convened a housing consortium a little over 2 years ago in response to the eviction moratorium to look at improving the eviction process in the courts. This consortium includes judges, commissioners, the clerk's office, and landlord and tenant advocates from Legal Aid, Legal Action, the Apartment Association of Southeastern Wisconsin, Mediate Wisconsin, and different housing service providers, including the Rental Housing Resource Center, which is a collaborative network of housing service providers and legal providers. And so far, what this group has done is gotten aligned on 2 main goals. One of those goals is to intervene as early as possible in the delinquency process and provide resolution alternatives before a case filing occurs. So really getting to people as early as possible to work on eviction prevention. Creating a shared triage and referral process across providers for landlords and tenants, depending on their needs. And the second main goal is developing a lower volume court to process those complex cases that really just couldn't be resolved before court gets involved, and taking more of a problem-solving court approach to eviction. So using the courts as a way to, like other problem-solving courts, connect people to resources, and also looking at improving court processes and information for self-represented litigants. So in terms of major actions that we're doing, we're working on creating a shared intake and triage process across providers to intervene early and route people to financial resources and legal services as effectively and efficiently as possible, and also building awareness with landlords and tenants about resources that are available. So for example, people are generally aware that rental assistance currently exists, but less aware of programs like free mediation and some legal services that are available to landlords and tenants. So in my role as the coordinator, I am facilitating those housing consortium meetings, the larger group meetings, working on creating sort of shared messaging around those goals that we have, working on outreach and prevention, encouraging alternatives to filing, and also working with a smaller group focused on the eviction court process. At this point, we are focusing exclusively on motions to seal. There's been a huge influx of people who are looking for housing and would like to get their names sealed from records if their cases have been dismissed. And so just looking for a more efficient way for people to get those records sealed. Another part of my role is providing information and referrals to landlords and tenants. So my position is housed at the Milwaukee Justice Center. So I am in the courthouse. I receive referrals from court sometimes from people who may have just been evicted and need some assistance in trying to figure out what they're going to do next, and think through, what they've already done and whether there's any resources that might be available to help them in that transition period. People also can reach out through the Milwaukee Justice Center website and provide some basic information about where they are in the legal process. And I can, I follow up with landlords and tenants and figure out how to best connect them to resources based on where they are in the process. So in terms of if a case has not been filed, referring people to the Rental Housing Resource Center, which is sort of a one-stop shop for landlords and tenants that can help people get connected to financial assistance and mediation. If there is a case where someone has received a notice to vacate but doesn't have an upcoming court date, referring them to Mediate Wisconsin so they can try to come to a resolution outside of court and get connected to resources through Mediate. And then if a case has already been filed, helping people get connected to rent assistance and legal assistance, and also providing just general information about the eviction court process. Part of doing outreach is looking at what is confusing about the court process for people, trying to create materials to fill in some information gaps. And that can include creating additional instructions to accompany forms that might be a little bit difficult for people to navigate on their own. I also have a court experience survey. So just people have been filling those out and are letting us know what they understand about court, what's working well, and what, if there are areas of improvement that they would like to see, just so we can sort of consider that feedback as well. One thing the larger group has done is create a resource sheet to be included with the summons. So anytime a tenant is getting served with court papers that they have an upcoming eviction case, resources for financial assistance, mediation, and legal assistance will be provided along with that court summons, and that should be happening fairly soon. And it also provides some general guidance of things that people can do proactively to reach out to their landlords before court and try to come to some sort of resolution before a court date if possible. Another major component of the project is collecting data. So learning more about who's reaching out for help and what issues and questions they have. I've also tracked all eviction case filings to understand what's happening in the courts. So right now, filings have basically returned to pre-pandemic levels. There have been just over 4,000 eviction cases filed so far this year. Also looking at trends in terms of what services are available. So in September of 2021, Eviction-Free MKE started providing representation to tenants who are income eligible for legal representation in court, and looking at the trends that have been impacted just by different services that have been available. So overall judgments are down, and the majority of cases are getting dismissed, which is part of why there's more people looking to have their records sealed, because right now they won't come off CCAP until 2 years after the case is resolved. One thing the group is very supportive of is trying to get more resources for eviction prevention. Once a case is filed, it can be very difficult for people to find another place to go and really to obtain housing stability. So prevention and just getting the word out about alternatives to filing is critically important. And part of my role, I've been doing some outreach to landlords through the city's landlord training and putting together just a voluntary sort of eviction diversion process that landlords can use when problems arise. And also working with the Justice Center to just increase access to information for people who are representing themselves in eviction court. And so that's basically what I've been up to.
That sounds like a lot that you've been up to, actually. So you talked about the pre-filing and the post-filing diversions, and obviously based on what you just said about the effects of even a filing on somebody's ability to secure future housing, you know, that those pre-filing people seem to be the hardest to reach. Are there things you would like to do, you know, that you haven't been able to do that, you know, other organizations could help with in getting that word out for the pre-filing stage, either to landlords or to tenants?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Rental Housing Resource Center is, like I said before, a collaborative network of housing providers and landlord tenant advocates. And so that's going to be a great place for prevention and outreach work. So really partnering with the Rental Housing Resource Center to get the word out as much as possible, right? So people are not waiting until the situation is so, you know, the communication has broken down and then things are headed for court. So especially the landlord trainings is certainly one way to start getting the word out, but there's a lot of work that can be done through the Rental Housing Resource Center and other organizations that are doing just general outreach to put the word out that that mediation is available, and that, like I said, the word about rental assistance is certainly out, but just encouraging people to talk before court, because there are other things that can be done before that filing occurs.
How are you working, if at all, across the states right now? So you said that there were, you know, several states that are in this pilot project, and you know, are you sharing information and data across states right now, or is that a later stage? And you know, what are you learning from the other states if there is coordination?
Sure. So on the data side, we've just started reporting data this past month has been the first time. So we have not, at some point there are going to be dashboards that we'll be able to sort of look across jurisdictions and find out what's happening. At this point, most of our information sharing, we meet monthly as a cohort. So we'll have open discussion, people will talk about what they're sharing. We also have shared just resources. And so when people are creating just informational materials that they've tailored to their jurisdiction, we have a shared site where we can all look at those and modify them to meet our needs. So it's a lot more about just sharing like physical resources. Some courts have changed court rules. So, you know, we're able to kind of look at what other jurisdictions are doing and try to think like, okay, what could work here in Milwaukee? And places are in varying stages of implementing this. There are some jurisdictions that have really been, have, you know, state Supreme Court orders and or legislation that puts eviction diversion sort of front and center, and states have been implementing those changes like in accordance with those rules, whereas other jurisdictions are handling things on a more local level and kind of building the plane while they're flying it. So so it's a lot of collaboration. We handle like a different topic each month. So we've done some trainings on how to write information and make sure that it's in plain language and that people can understand it, how to use technology, what sort of technological advances courts can use with automated court reminders and things like that, chat bots to provide information about the court process. And so it's a lot more of just sharing once a month at those meetings.
Is this a specific Milwaukee County program for our state, or are there others across the state working on this too? So, is it just Milwaukee County that's part of this coalition?
Sure. So for this National Center for State Courts grant, yes, Milwaukee County is the only place in Wisconsin that has received this funding to do this.
Are there certain judges who've been assigned to work with this program, or is there, an idea of having a dedicated court like a treatment court, or that kind of a system set up for the future?
Sure. So right now, the way that cases are handled in Milwaukee County is we have one small claims judge that does the eviction hearings. We also have 3 small claims commissioners that do eviction hearings and a 4th small claims commissioner that handles evidentiary hearings. So really that would be the staff primarily impacted by any changes that are made right now. The small claims judge changes every year. So right now we are working with Judge Davis is the current judge, and Judge Hanrahan will be starting in August. So we're all kind of working together on this ceiling issue to do some brainstorming and problem solving around that right now.
And you're the coordinator, but do you have other staff, or is it just you right now?
Just me.
What is the hope for, the rest of the time of this grant? What do you hope to achieve by the end of the grant time? And, is it possible that this grant will continue for future years, or is this a very limited time frame that you've got to work with?
Sure. Good question. So there is an option to potentially renew the grant for up to another 4 years after this 2-year period from National Center for State Courts. And they actually just released, they are looking for a second cohort also to expand into different areas of the country as well that were not part of this first cohort. In terms of what we'd like to accomplish, really looking at pushing out more information to self-represented litigants, looking at the court process. And so, when you say turning the courts into a problem-solving court, looking at what aspects of problem-solving courts would be important to integrate into the existing small claims process. So some of that could be looking at how cases are scheduled, how people find out about resources in court. And so goals for this grant, I think, would be this first year is about looking at what's working other places and figuring out what can work here, and coming up with a plan for how Milwaukee County wants to make modifications to better increase access to resources and better serve litigants on evictions. But it wouldn't necessarily be turning small claims court into a treatment court per se. And part of that is due to the case volume is significant at this point.
What's the best way for having people find you? Is it through the Milwaukee Justice Center website or through the Rental Housing Resource Center? What's your suggestion for getting the word out? How we can help you do that?
So for the Eviction Diversion Initiative, the Justice Center website, there's a landlord tenant page, and that's typically the way landlords and tenants will reach out, and or I'll get referrals directly from court. That's certainly one way to find me. For the prevention work, the Rental Housing Resource Center is located at 728 North James Lovell in the Community Advocates Building. And they are, like I said, sort of a one-stop shop for landlord-tenant issues, information. And so in a lot of ways, they are the phase 1 on the prevention piece, and I'm sort of phase 2 for if people end up in court, just helping them figure out where they need to go from there.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan. Is there anything else you'd like to add that has come to mind during our talk?
I don't think so. Not at this time. Thanks for having me.
So thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing what your initiative accomplishes.
Thank you.